Hello, dear listener. Welcome to another gentle journey through the past, a quiet moment between you and the ancient world. Wherever you are, whether nestled under blankets, traveling through the quiet night, or lying awake as your mind seeks stillness, I invite you to slow down. Take a breath and let the hum of history settle around you like a warm shawl in winter. What time is it where you are? Is the world outside your window asleep too? Perhaps the stars are watching. Perhaps only the moon knows you're awake. Tonight, we'll be wandering through the frost-covered pages of the medieval world, a time of candlelight and silence, of cold stone and hopeful hearts. A world where winters were long and life didn't stop for snow. Before we begin, if you find comfort hearing these quiet stories in the echo of the past, I gently invite you to follow this channel or share it with someone who could use a soft escape. No pressure, just an open door, waiting. Now, close your eyes if you wish. Let the world fade, and come with me. The medieval world did not have central heating, or fleece-lined coats, or electric lights that chased away the dusk. Winter was not a season to be admired but endured, and yet there was beauty in its quiet cruelty. Imagine you are standing on a dirt road somewhere in 14th century England. The trees are bare, their black limbs clawing at the pale sky like fingers frozen in prayer. The ground is hard. The earth has curled into itself, frozen solid. Beneath your feet, the frost crunches with every step. Smoke rises from the chimneys of a thatched village nearby, curling into the colorless air. The sun, low and listless, casts no warmth, only long, tired shadows across the rooftops. A dog barks, a crow calls. You pull your cloak tighter. This was winter for most medieval people, dark, slow, and hungry. Seasons meant survival. Spring brought hope. Summer brought work. Autumn was the rush to gather and store. But winter brought stillness and struggle. In towns and cities, the streets froze over. In the countryside, fields lay blanketed in silence. No plows, no harvest, only waiting. The common people, peasants, and farmers relied on what they had saved. Barley, dried beans, salted pork. Wood was precious. Coal, rare, and warmth was earned. Fireplaces smoked, sputtered, and hissed. The hearth was the heart of every home, and families huddled around it like moths to a single flame. There were no thermostats, no weather apps, just instinct, just tradition. Inside a stone castle, winter was a different beast, but no easier. The walls were thick and cold to the touch, holding chill like memory. Tapestries hung heavy, not only for beauty, but insulation. Rushes were scattered on the floors, sometimes with herbs to mask the smell of dampness and decay. Candles flickered, casting shadows that danced along ceiling beams. Wind whistled through the cracks. Even lords and ladies wore layers upon layers. Velvet, wool, fur. They sat near fires that burned day and night. They drank hot mulled wine. They listened to minstrels play songs of warmth and spring, longing for the light. But outside, the world held its breath. Frogs hibernated in frozen mud. Rivers turned to ice. The sun barely crested the horizon, then dipped again like a candle reluctantly relit. Chickens laid fewer eggs. Milk soured faster. Children played only in short bursts. Their laughter trailed off quickly into coughing. Frostbite was a constant threat. So was hunger. But even in this bleak landscape, there was something comforting, something ancient, timeless, a rhythm, a lull. The land slept, and so did its people early nights, long dreams, thick blankets of hay and wool. It was a season of closeness, of necessity, of small, glowing moments in a world built from cold. And yet, life continued. There were births and deaths. There were letters written, candles made, shoes repaired, prayers whispered. There were songs soft and slow to pass the hours. And stories, always stories, passed from lips to listening ears by firelight. Tonight, we'll walk with them. We'll visit their hearths. We'll breathe their air. And we'll find, perhaps, that winter didn't only take, it gave too. Now, as the wind howls outside your window and your pillow grows warmer with each breath, let us begin the true journey into the heart of medieval winter. The castle rises from the frozen hills like a sleeping beast beneath a snow-laced sky. Its stone towers reach upward, gray and solemn, against the brittle light of winter noon. A moat, half frozen, circles the base like a silver ring, still and silent except for the wind skating over its surface. The drawbridge groans as it lowers. You step onto wooden planks dusted in frost, your breath a soft cloud before your face. And now, we enter. Inside the castle walls, the air changes. The cold is different here, not biting, but lingering. It seeps through the stones, curls under doors, rests on the skin like an unwelcome whisper. It is not warmth you feel, but shelter, a different kind of protection. In the great hall, fires roar. This is the heart of the castle in winter, a vast, echoing chamber where heat and humanity gather like refugees. The hearth at the far end glows with orange coals. A fire blazes within, spitting ash onto the stone. Logs thick and damp from the forest hiss as they burn. Servants move silently, their footsteps muffled by rushes strewn across the floor. Fresh herbs are tucked among the dried reeds. Lavender, rosemary, sweet flag, not for decoration, but for masking odor. The floor is not swept often. Winter makes things settle. Tapestries line the walls, heavy, embroidered, regal. They tell stories of battles, saints, or mythical beasts. But tonight, they serve another purpose. They hold the warmth in. Above, banners sway gently in the currents of rising heat. The smell of wood smoke clings to everything. Meals in winter are quieter. Gone are the outdoor feasts of summer. No fresh fruits, no roasted boar from a day's hunt. Instead, there is stew. Always stew. Thick, brown, bubbling, made from salted beef, dried peas, carrots pulled from underground stores. There is stale bread dipped in broth to soften it, and maybe if the larder allows a pie of minced meat and dried fruit. Wine is mulled with spices, cinnamon, cloves, sometimes honey. It warms the hands, the lips, the chest. The goblets are pewter, always cold to the touch. The lord and lady dine at the high table. Below, the retainers eat in silence or murmured conversation. Outside the hall, snow begins to fall. The chambers above are no warmer. Stone walls do not change with the seasons. They are cold in summer and colder still now. In the bedrooms, thick curtains hang around the beds, not for privacy, but for insulation. They are drawn tight at night, trapping breath and warmth within. The beds themselves are piles of wool and feathers, heaped high under linen and fur. Fox, wolf, bear, the skins are not luxury, but necessity. Before sleep, servants bring warm bricks wrapped in cloth to place under the sheets. Candles flicker, shadows stretch. The floors are bare and hard. Even the noblest toes fear the chill. At dawn, the condensation on the window panes has frozen into delicate patterns, icy ferns and blooming stars. In the solar, a private sitting room, the ladies gather. They sew in the weak daylight, hands wrapped in wool. Sometimes they sing. The solar is warmer than other rooms, placed high to catch the sun. But the warmth is pale, fleeting. The stone still sighs with cold. Here, they spin wool, mend stockings, stitch embroidery onto cloaks. One woman reads aloud, perhaps from a psalter, perhaps a tale of chivalry. Her voice is soft, broken only by the hiss of the fire. Children play in the corners. They build castles from wood blocks or chase each other beneath firs. And when they nap, it is under the cloaks of their mothers. Night falls early. By 4 o'clock, darkness presses against the windows. Candles are lit, torches flare, the castle quiets. In the chapel, monks chant vespers a low hum that echoes through vaulted stone. Their breath fogs in the candlelight, and still the cold remains. The days are long, but the nights longer. Time slows in winter. Without crops to tend or fields to ride, life folds inward. There are games, chess, dice, storytelling. There are plans for spring weddings arranged, debts tallied, maps drawn. There is reflection and waiting. In the library, a scholar copies a manuscript with frozen fingers. The ink thickens in the well. His candle burns low. He does not speak. Somewhere deeper in the castle, an old knight sleeps before the fire, his armor long since stored away, his dreams still full of frost-covered battlefields. Outside, the wind howls. But in here, in this stone belly of the world, people breathe. Not easily, not warmly, but together. They survive the season not through luxury, but through rhythm, through ritual, through one another. And when morning comes, a servant rises before the sun to stoke the fires. He moves quietly, a bundle of twigs in one hand, a flint in the other. He tends to the hearth in the great hall, in the chapel, in the lady's solar. Each flame, a tiny rebellion against the dark, and in that soft, smoky light, the castle wakes again. The bells ring. The cook begins to boil oats. The rooster crows somewhere far below in the courtyard. And winter continues. Not conquered, not feared, but understood. Far from the stone walls and tall chimneys of castles, the countryside sleeps under a blanket of snow. A blanket not of warmth, but of silence. The fields are bare. The skies, the color of tin. Crows perch on the rafters of empty barns. And smoke curls, slowly from the low chimneys of cottages tucked deep into the frozen hills. You are now in a world where winter is not endured in comfort but faced with quiet courage. The cottage is small, almost hidden beneath the snow-drifted thatch. Its roof is low, its door creaks. Inside, the ceiling is so close you can touch it with a raised hand, but it is home. The walls are made of wattle and daub sticks and straw packed with mud, and the cold seeps through every inch. The floor is dirt, hard as stone in winter. There are no windows, only slits, and these are shuttered tight against the wind. A fire burns at the center of the single room. The smoke escapes through a hole in the roof, or sometimes doesn't escape at all. Eyes water, coughs echo, but the hearth is everything. The family gathers around it like pilgrims. They do not sit in chairs. They crouch on stools, logs, or the floor itself. Woolen cloaks are wrapped around shoulders. Hats are kept on, even indoors. Children press close to their mother's side. Grandparents sit nearest the flames. Old bones need the heat most. A pot hangs above the fire, always warm, always half full. Barley, leeks, whatever dried meat remains. The stew is shared not equally, but fairly. There is no table. Food is eaten from rough bowls, with fingers or wooden spoons. The bread is dense and dark. Sometimes, if lucky, there's cheese, or dried apples, strung above the hearth months ago. Outside, the chores never end. The animals must be tended, even in snow. Cows stand steaming in the byre, their breath rising in puffs. Goats bleat. Chickens shuffle in their coop, feathers fluffed. The pig, fat and grumpy, grunts from beneath a blanket of straw. Each morning, the eldest son trudges out with a bucket. His boots crunch on the frozen earth. Water must be fetched from the stream, its surface chipped open with a spade. The water is cold. bone deep cold. He carries it home with red fingers, shaking hands, and wet sleeves. He doesn't complain. This is winter. There is little light. The days are short, the sun weak and low. Children wake in darkness. They help with chores in half light and return to the cottage before dusk. Their noses run. Their feet are wrapped in scraps of wool, sometimes tied with rope for shoes. They learn to be still, to be quiet. There are few toys. Sometimes they carve shapes from wood or chase shadows on the wall cast by the fire. And when one coughs, the parents listen closely. Coughs linger in winter, and not every child sees spring. Work slows, but never stops. There are no crops to tend, but tools need mending. The father sharpens the plow, though it won't touch soil for months. He patches the roof with straw, repairs the fence, checks the barn for rot. The mother spins wool, weaves cloth, scrubs pots. She counts the onions hanging from the rafters. She measures how much flour remains. She hides the last apple. They barter with neighbors, salt for eggs, cider for firewood. And always there is prayer. Not loud, not desperate, but steady. Sometimes there is community. The village gathers at the church for mass. Even in winter, even in snow, they walk there, boots tied with string, hands tucked beneath cloaks. The chapel is cold. Stone echoes every sound. But inside, they sing. They kneel. They pass bread and blessing. Afterward, the women share gossip. The men trade news. And the children, red-cheeked and shivering, laugh in the snow. Winter is not kind. It tightens its grip around the poor first. When the firewood runs low, the furniture burns. When the flour runs out, they eat broth. When the broth is gone, they wait. Not all survive. Elders slip away in sleep. Infants fail to wake. The village buries its dead in hard, frozen ground, hammers cracking ice, breath rising like incense. There are no grand ceremonies, only silence and stillness, and a mother's hand pressed to a son's cold cheek. But there is also resilience. They do not give in. They do not curse the snow. They endure. They find joy in the smallest things. The first icicle dripping, a cracked egg in midwinter, a warm dog at their feet, a story told by firelight. And they laugh. They dance on Plow Monday, even if the fields are still too hard to sow. They dream of spring, even if their stores are nearly empty, because that's what winter teaches. How to hope, how to wait, how to hold on. So tonight, as the wind whispers outside your own window, picture them. A family gathered around a smoky fire. A child asleep beneath two patched blankets. A woman stirring stew with cracked hands. A man rising before dawn just to bring back water. No fanfare, no spotlight. Only life, soft and stubborn, surviving the cold. Winter, in the medieval world, was not something to be outwitted. It was something to be endured. And what one wore, how many layers, how well they were stitched, how long they lasted often meant the difference between comfort and suffering. So let's open the chest, lift the lid, and take a quiet look at what people wore to greet the frost. Begin with the underlayer, always the underlayer. Even in winter, linen was worn closest to the skin, a simple, breathable fabric, soft with use. For both peasant and noble alike, the shirt or smock of linen was the quiet companion to every outfit. In summer, it cooled. In winter, it trapped warmth, especially when dry. It was changed rarely, washed even less. And over it, the layers began to rise. The poor wore wool. Wool was everything. It was heavy, scratchy, and smelled of sheep when damp, but it was warm even when wet, and that made it precious. The typical peasant outfit in winter, a long wool tunic, often passed down through generations, patched, darned, and faded with years. Trousers, also of wool, tied at the waist with string or leather. Woolen hose, a kind of medieval legging, hugged the calves, sometimes reaching all the way to the thigh. Over this, a mantle or cloak, fastened with a simple wooden clasp. Hoods were sewn in, or worn separately. The hood was more than fashion. It shielded wind, trapped heat, and could be pulled low against snow or sleet. No one went far without it. The nobility, however, wore warmth with elegance. Their clothes were thicker, longer, richer in color, and layered not just for heat but for statement. Imagine a lady of the court in midwinter. She wears a chemise of fine linen, snow white, embroidered at the hem. Over it, a kirtle, a fitted gown of wool, dyed in deep blues or forest greens. Her sleeves are tight, buttoned with bone or brass. Around her waist, a girdle of silk. Over her shoulders, a fur-lined surcoat. It billows slightly as she walks, trailing behind her in the drafty corridors of the castle. And atop it all, a mantle of velvet or brocade, lined with squirrel, fur, or fox. She glides, but beneath the grace, she shivers still. Men fared no differently. A nobleman's winter wardrobe was layered with thought, a tunic of thick wool, dyed crimson or gold, woolen hose, split and sewn to fit snugly, a surcoat, open at the sides, lined with fur, and boots of leather, sometimes stuffed with straw. His cloak was often the showpiece lined with ermine or otter, fastened with a jeweled clasp. It swept the floor, it rustled when he turned. But even the finest cloak could not keep out the wind that crept through stone hallways and rattled shutters. So he too stood close to the fire, and he too rubbed his hands together when no one watched. For warmth was a privilege, and no one knew this better than those who had none. The beggar on the street had no mantle. The child on the road wore only rags. The widow wrapped herself in a blanket not meant for outdoors. They burned what they could, sticks, dung, even old boots. They huddled together, slept in doorways, whispered prayers into their sleeves. And still they survived. Sometimes there were other tricks too. Clothes were not the only defense. In some regions, straw was tucked inside boots. Bricks, heated in the fire, were wrapped in cloth and carried in carts or beds. Iron pans with coals known as foot warmers were placed under tables. Dogs were invited to sleep in the bed, chickens in the corner of the room, and husbands, wives, children, they shared the same mattress. Side by side, breath warming the dark. Hats were essential, even indoors, even by the fire. The head loses heat fastest, and medieval people knew it. Women wore wimples, coifs, or linen caps. Men wore woolen hoods, some with lyre pipes, long tails that wrapped around the neck. Children wore what they could often hand-me-downs that no longer fit, but better loose than none. Fur was both friend and status. Poor folk wore what they trapped, rabbit, fox, weasel. Nobles wore fur imported from afar, ermine, sable, lynx. Sometimes the fur was worn outward, sometimes hidden, sewn inside cloaks or boots. In cathedrals, monks were forbidden from wearing fur, but exceptions were made in bitter winters. Even the holy needed warmth. And yet, no matter how much they wore, it was never truly enough. Cold found its way in. It crept between stitches. It bit through layers. It lingered on toes and fingers. And so people moved. They chopped wood. They milked cows. They walked from room to room, barn to field, fire to fire. Stillness was the enemy. Motion, the best warmth of all. As night came, clothes became blankets. Mantles became mattresses. Boots were dried by the hearth, stuffed with wool. And in the flickering light of tallow candles, families undressed just enough to sleep, then buried themselves in hay, in fur, in each other, waiting for morning, for spring, for another day of cold, survived. Hunger has its own sound. It rustles in empty sacks. It creaks in floorboards as footsteps slow. It lingers in cold rooms where the fire burns low and the pot is half full. In the medieval winter, food was not taken for granted. It was stored, preserved, shared, and sometimes gone. Let's open the larder door, feel the dry chill of salted air, and step into the quiet world of medieval winter food. There is no fresh produce, no tomatoes, no bananas, no oranges waiting in wooden crates. The garden lies buried in frost. The trees are bare, and so people eat what they have kept: grain, beans, salted meat, dried fruit, hard cheese. Each item a memory of summer, sealed in jars or cloth or barrels. And each meal a puzzle. How much to use, how much to save, because spring is still months away. The heart of every meal is the pot. The pot hangs above the fire, blackened with years of smoke. It is never truly empty, always waiting to be filled, refilled, stirred. Stew is the centerpiece. It begins with water, then scraps, bones, beans, a slice of onion, a handful of barley, sometimes cabbage, carrots, or turnips, stored in the root cellar. The stew cooks all day. The smell fills the cottage or castle hall, mingling with the scent of wool and smoke. And when it is ready, it is shared. Always shared. The ladle dips deep, and bowls are filled elders first, then children, then the rest. There is no waste. Even the broth is sopped up with bread dark, dense, made of rye or barley, baked days before. Bread is not soft, it is hard. Sometimes almost stone-like. It must be dipped in stew or soaked in cider to be eaten without cracking teeth. But it is sacred. In every home, a loaf is wrapped in cloth, hidden from mice. And when the last loaf is cut, a decision must be made. Bake more if flour remains, or eat less. And pray for spring. Meat, if present, is salted. Slaughter came in late autumn just before the frost. There were no refrigerators, only salt. Pigs were bled, hung, cleaned, their meat packed in barrels of coarse white salt. Ham, bacon, sausage, it tasted strong sometimes, too strong, but it lasted. Sometimes it was boiled to soften the salt. Other times, chopped into stew. Nothing was wasted. Even the fat was saved, rendered into lard for frying, or spread on stale bread as a poor man's butter. Cheese is hard and sharp. Made months ago, it has aged in cool cellars. It crumbles. It smells. But it keeps, and it feeds a family when little else remains. With cheese and bread, a winter meal can be made. And when paired with cider or ale, it becomes a small feast. Sometimes there are apples, dried in summer sun, strung up near the fire, leathery and dark. Children chew them slowly. They taste like autumn sweet, sour, fading. They remind people what they're waiting for. Festivals bring flavor. During Christmas or Epiphany, the food improves if only for a day. A roast goose in the Lord's Hall, a sweet custard for the abbey monks, spiced wine, honeyed nuts, gingerbread, if one is lucky. These are days of joy, of music, of loosening belts and laughing by candlelight. And then the hunger returns. But memories feed the soul. In the coldest months, creativity is survival. Grain is stretched with ground acorns. Soups are thickened with leftover bread. Bones are boiled again and again until the broth turns pale. Even candle tallow has been eaten not often, but in desperation. And when someone knocks on the door in the dark seeking food, a bowl is offered, even if it means less for the family. Because hunger is understood and shared, eating is not rushed. In winter, time moves slowly. Meals are rituals, slow, quiet, close to the fire. The bowl warms the fingers. The steam fogs the lashes. The taste simple, salty, warm reminds you you're still alive. Children are fed first. Elders are watched with care. Sometimes someone tells a story about summer, about saints, about how the stew tastes better this year, even though it doesn't. In castles, the food is richer, but not endless. Yes, there are pies filled with preserved fruit or meat. Yes, there are roasted birds, peacock, goose, pheasant. Yes, there are kitchens with scullions and cooks, turning spits over glowing coals. But even here, the stores can run thin. The salt beef runs out, the flour spoils, the wine freezes in its cask. And so the Lord eats stew, and the lady eats bread, just like the rest. In monasteries, meals are taken in silence. Monks sit in long rows, hands folded, heads bowed. The food is simple: beans, cheese, stale bread, maybe a pear. One monk reads aloud from scripture, his voice echoing in the cold. No one speaks. The clatter of wooden bowls fills the room. And when they rise, they thank the Lord and go back to work. Food is life, but in winter, it's also memory. Each bite recalls harvest. Each sip, the sun, even the poorest meal is a thread tying the present to a future that surely must be warmer. They eat to survive, but also to believe that the frost will melt, that the fields will grain, that stew will one day give way to strawberries. And so they chew, they sip, they savor. And now imagine yourself there, a spoon in hand, steam rising, the fire crackling behind you, a loaf of bread in your lap, someone humming softly in the corner, a dog curled by your feet. Outside, the snow still falls. But in here, the bowl is warm. The food is simple, and for this moment, it is enough. Night falls early in winter. By the time the last light of the sun fades behind the trees, the world outside becomes a painting in gray. The air is sharp, like ice in the lungs. The snow glows pale, silent, and still. And inside, the fire begins its nightly ritual. The hearth is more than heat. It is the heart of the home, the center of the room, the anchor of the family. Whether in a peasant's cottage or a castle's great hall, the fire is where life slows down. Wood is added carefully, a luxury never wasted. Coals are stirred. Ash is swept to the side. The fire crackles. It pops. It hisses like an old friend whispering secrets. And around it, people gather. In small cottages, the entire family sits close. There is no chimney, only a hole in the roof for smoke to find its way out. Sometimes it lingers. Eyes water. Clothes absorb the scent of burning oak. But no one complains. The youngest sits on their mother's lap. The father sharpens a blade. An elder rocks slowly on a stool, wrapped in every scrap of wool they own. There is little to do. The day's work is done. The stew has been eaten. The chores will return tomorrow. Now, there is time. Time to tell stories. Not written stories, not books, but voices in the dark. Words passed from memory to ear. A grandmother speaks of the winter of '73 when the snow reached the rooftops and the cows had to be fed by candlelight. A father tells of the time he got lost in the woods at dusk and heard voices that weren't there. A mother shares a tale she heard as a girl about a man who wandered into the hills and never returned except in dreams. Children listen, wide-eyed, not afraid. Not really. The fire is here. Their parents are near. The world is safe for now, In castles, the fire roars higher, but the feeling is the same. Servants finish their work. The hall is quiet. A few torches burn low on the walls. The noble family gathers near the hearth, sitting on benches cushioned with fur. The lady reads aloud a psalm or a romance. A lute plays softly. A dog rests at the Lord's feet. The steward dozes with his chin in his hand. Even here, in stone and silk, the fire connects them to warmth, to memory, to each other. Children fall asleep by the flames. Their heads tip. Their limbs go still. Mothers lift them gently. Fathers carry them to bed. Blankets are wrapped. Kisses are placed on cold foreheads. A few whispered words of blessing are spoken. And then, quiet. The only sound is the fire dimming, settling, breathing with the house. The fire must be tended. Even as people sleep, someone rises every few hours to add a log, stir the embers, keep the cold at bay. In cottages, this task falls to whoever wakes first. In castles, a servant walks the halls, eyes heavy, carrying a pail of kindling. In monasteries, the night monk moves in silence, lighting the next hour's candle, muttering prayers. The fire is not just warmth, it is time. It marks the night, one log at a time. Sometimes, couples sit together long after others sleep. They speak softly of debts, of dreams, of planting, of God. Sometimes, they sit in silence, letting the fire speak for them. Sometimes, they hold hands. Sometimes, they don't need to. The fire sees everything. The joy of a new baby passed from arms to arms while snow falls thick outside. The tears of a girl who misses her brother gone to war. The laughter of neighbors who share ale and forget hunger for a night. The silence of mourning when someone does not return. It burns no matter what. It listens. In its glow, shadows dance. On the walls, long and crooked. On the floor, flickering like dreams. Children imagine monsters. Lovers see halos. The old see ghosts, and as the night deepens, the fire grows soft. The flames shrink. The light turns gold, then amber, then red, until only coals remain glowing like the last stars. And then sleep. The house settles. The wind hums outside. Mice scurry in the rafters. Owls call from the trees. And within, under blankets, under cloaks, under fur, people dream of warmth, of light, of spring. The fire will wake again tomorrow, and so will they. But for now, let the night hold them. Let the fire guard them. Let the quiet keep them safe. There is a silence in winter that is not peaceful. It's the silence between coughs, the stillness in a sick room, the hush that falls when a child's fever rises. In the medieval world, illness in winter was more than discomfort. It was danger. A knock at the door no one had strength to answer. A shadow that lingered after the fire had died. And yet, even in the face of chills, wheezing lungs, and whispered prayers, people fought back. With herbs, with faith, with stories, let us step quietly now into the healing and the hurting of long, cold nights. It begins with a cough. Soft at first, a child wrapped in wool, curled near the fire, begins to sniffle. A man returning from the woods sneezes, rubs his nose with a rough sleeve. An elder in the corner clears her throat again and again. It is dismissed. It's the cold, they say. It'll pass. But sometimes it doesn't. There are no hospitals, no antibiotics, no clinics, no antiseptic wipes. Instead, there are hands rough but caring, herbs dried and strung above the hearth, wooden bowls of broth, and prayers mumbled over pale foreheads. Illness is treated at home because there is nowhere else, and so the family becomes the doctor, the cottage becomes the sick room, and the winter becomes a test. Colds and flus were common and feared. They came with the chill, settled into the lungs, and lingered like smoke. A mild illness might pass in a few days, but fevers in winter often meant weakness that never left. Or worse, when the snow fell thick and firewood grew scarce and food ran thin, even a cough could end a life. The remedies were simple and strange: a poultice of warm onions placed on the chest, steam from boiling thyme breathed in through a cloth, tea made from elderberry, honey, sage, and nettle. Garlic was crushed and mixed with vinegar, both a medicine and a ward against evil. To ease sore throats, they used syrup of licorice. To soothe chills, they wrapped the body in hot bricks. Some placed mustard seeds in cloth and tied them to the feet. Others swore by heated stones laid on the belly while the patient rested. No one remedy worked for all, but each held hope. Monasteries became centers of healing. The monks, with their quiet halls and herb gardens, tended to the sick with care and prayer. They brewed infusions of chamomile, comfrey, and yarrow. They copied medical texts by candlelight. They washed wounds gently in silence. The infirmary was simple: a long wooden bed, clean linens, soup at dawn, and a Bible beside the pillow. Some patients recovered. Others were carried to the churchyard in peace. Illness was not just physical, it was spiritual. People believed disease came from sin, or bad air, or a punishment from God. And so healing required more than medicine. There were relics, bones of saints, touched for blessings, holy water sprinkled on fevers, masses offered in the name of the sick. Sometimes the village priest would come to whisper last rites. His breath, visible in the frozen air, mingled with the candle smoke of the dying room. Children were the most vulnerable. Their coughs turned into silence quickly. Mothers watched their faces for color, checked foreheads with the back of a trembling hand, held them close, whispering lullabies even when the child could no longer hear. When a child died, the room stayed quiet for a long time. No wailing, just the fire, and the sound of one chair being moved away from the hearth. But not all ended in grief. Most winters, most people recovered. They rose slowly, blankets still wrapped around their shoulders. They stepped carefully across the cold floor. They drank broth, looked out the shuttered window, and thanked something, anyone, that they were still here. Recovery was slow, but so was the season. Time healed. In the village, word of sickness spread quickly. Neighbors whispered at the well, "Old John has the fever. Lady Marion's baby has the wheeze. The blacksmith hasn't been seen in days." And then someone would arrive with soup, or bread, or firewood. Help came in quiet ways, placed at the doorstep, left with a nod, a gesture, a kindness that required no words. The seasons shaped medicine. Winter made herbs scarce, but some were dried in summer, saved in cloth bags, hung from beams. Rosemary for strength, mint for the stomach, yarrow to stop bleeding, lavender for sleep, feverfew for headaches. The knowledge passed from mother to daughter, from old healer to young apprentice, from village to monastery. Not always correct, but always tried. Doctors were rare and not always trusted. Most were called leeches. They wore long robes, carried knives, and spoke in Latin. They bled the sick. They examined the urine. They prescribed mercury or wine or strange powders. Some were wise. Many were not, and most villagers preferred their own cures, born of tradition and trial. Because healing in winter was not a science. It was a story, a belief, a hope. There were plagues, but not every winter. When they came, the great plagues, the wasting sicknesses, the cough that bled the villages, closed their gates. The healthy stayed inside. The sick were buried quickly. The world held its breath, but those were rare. Most winters were quieter, more personal. A single child, a single elder, a single week of wondering if the cough would pass. And even in the fear, there was comfort. A hand held through the night, a blanket warmed by the fire, a whispered prayer as snow fell outside. Healing was not just about survival. It was about presence. The presence of another, of warmth, of light. Now, the room is dim. A candle flickers. A cup of broth cools beside the bed. A child breathes deeply, steadily. A mother sighs, her eyes closing for the first time in hours. Outside, the wind moans through the trees. But inside, the fever breaks. The body rests. The night goes on. And hope, small and flickering like the last ember in the hearth, lives on. In a castle high on a hill where the wind sings through arrow slits and snow coats the battlements like icing on stone, winter does not knock its seeps. But behind thick tapestries, under fur-lined cloaks, and beside roaring hearths, the noble class meets the cold not with dread, but with distraction. For while the poor endure the season, the wealthy attempt to forget it. Let us enter that world, one of flickering torchlight, echoing music, and boots muddy from the hunt. The day begins with silence. The corridors are cold. The stone floors sting bare feet. But the chambermaids are up early lighting fires, shaking out cloaks, preparing basins of tepid water for washing. The nobleman stretches beneath wool and fur. The lady rises, her breath visible as she brushes her hair beside the frost-covered glass. Breakfast is sparse, bread, cheese, weak ale. The real feast will come later. But for now, there is something else planned. The winter hunt. Yes, even in snow, even in ice, the noble pastime of hunting continues. Wolves and boars don't hibernate. Neither do hawks. And so, wrapped in layers of wool and leather, the Lord and his party ride out. Their horse's breath mists the air. Dogs bark, eager and wild. The horns sound through the white trees. They wear heavy gloves, carry spears, bows, or falcons. And the snow crunches underfoot like brittle parchment. The hunt is ritual. It is sport, yes, but also power. The forest belongs to the Lord. The animals too. To ride into the woods is to assert dominion not just over the land, but over winter itself. The noble shouts, the dogs run, the arrows fly, a deer is felled, his body laid on the snow, steaming in the cold. The meat will feed the hall. The antlers might decorate it. Returning from the hunt is triumphant. The riders are flushed. The snow on their cloaks melts slowly as they dismount. In the hall, servants gather. The kill is displayed. The fire is stoked higher. And the rest of the day begins. Entertainment fills the hours. Winter days are short, but within the castle, they are dense with activity. There are games, chess, backgammon, dice. There are readings, romances of knights, tales of saints, poetry from distant lands. There are performances traveling minstrels, jesters, even acrobats who brave the roads to earn coin and shelter. Their songs echo through the vaulted halls. Their jokes bring laughter. For a moment, winter is forgotten. Art thrives in winter. With no fields to tend or battles to fight, nobles turn inward. A lady embroiders an image of spring flowers she hasn't seen in months. A young lord composes verses to a woman he's never met. A scribe copies a manuscript with gloved hands, his ink freezing if he pauses too long. Music drifts from the solar, harp, flute, lute, soft melodies that shimmer like frost in candlelight. And from the kitchens comes the scent of roasting meat. Evenings are grand. Feasts are held, even in leaner winters. Tables are laid with trenchers, flat loaves of bread used as plates. Pewter cups gleam, A whole boar's head might grace the center of the table, mouth stuffed with apples. The Lord raises a toast. The lady offers a smile that is both polite and tired. Servants move in shadows. Dogs wait for bones. And when the feast ends, the music begins. Dancing in winter is more than joy, it is defiance. The cold waits outside the stone walls. But inside, feet move, skirts spin, hands touch. The carol, the branle, the bass dance. Men and women step together, faces lit by torchlight, cheeks flushed with wine and warmth. The hall becomes alive. The night, less cold. And in the rhythm of it all, the turning, the bowing, the laughter, they remember what it feels like to be alive. Romance breathes in winter's pause. Letters are exchanged. Glances held longer than necessary. Poems hidden in books. There are engagements arranged. Dowries discussed. Even snow-covered roofs cannot muffle the stirrings of the heart. And sometimes a single kiss behind a column becomes a memory to last until spring. But not all is bright. There is boredom, restlessness, and fear. The rows are closed, messengers delayed, a letter from the king arrives a month late, and his news is already outdated. A noble worries about a cousin at war. A lady grieves a lost child, her mourning hidden behind silks. The tapestries cannot warm every shadow, and so they cling to tradition. Feasts on holy days, prayers at dawn, a fire always lit in the main hall. These rituals become anchors, reminders that winter is part of the cycle, not the end. They wait, they plan, they endure, not through hardship like the poor, but through ceremony. As midnight comes, the dancers slow, the minstrels pack their lutes, the fire dies lower. A lady leans her head on her maid's shoulder as she's undressed for bed. A lord stares into the flames, wondering how much longer the stores will last. And the snow keeps falling. In the quiet of the upper chambers, furs are pulled close, curtains drawn tight, a candle flickers beside a half-read book. A winter wind howls through the arrow slits, but no one listens. They are asleep, and dreaming perhaps of spring gardens, sunlit pavilions, and hunts where the air smells of pine, not frost. Some winters arrive gently, others do not. For the poor, for the forgotten, for those who do not have a hearth of their own, winter is not a season. It is a sentence. It begins not with snow, but with silence, a silence from doors that no longer open, from fields that no longer yield, from neighbors who no longer share. And it ends, if one is lucky, with survival. Let us walk carefully now through their world. A beggar's morning is not marked by bells or bird song. It begins with cold toes, with fingers too stiff to bend, with a stomach that has not known fullness since autumn. There is no fire to rise beside, no warm broth waiting, only the sound of distant dogs barking and the wind rattling broken shutters. They stretch slowly, if they slept at all, a barn, a ruined shed, a patch of straw beneath a bridge. These are their bedrooms, and winter knows where to find them. Their clothing is what they've kept, a tunic once wool, now patched with sackcloth, shoes made from scraps of leather tied with twine, a blanket, thin and damp from snowmelt. They wrap themselves in layers, not for comfort, for survival. Hands remain bare. Faces go unwashed, hair tangles beneath ice, but none of that matters. Warmth is a luxury. Cleanliness, a dream. Hunger walks beside them. The fields are empty. The market's cold and tight-fisted. Even scraps from noble feasts are guarded closely now. So they beg. At the gates of the town, at the doors of churches, at the edge of the Lord's land, alms, they whisper. Bread, please. Anything. Sometimes a crust of bread. A frozen heel of cheese. a cup of broth poured without a word. Other times, nothing. A turned back, a slammed door, a guard's glare, and still they keep walking because movement is warmth, stillness is death. They wander from village to village, from shrine to shrine, following rumors of charity, of shelter, of kind heart. And along the way, some fall. They are found in ditches, curled like leaves, under trees, dusted with snow, in alleys, with hands frozen to the shape of prayer. No name, no grave, only frost. But not all are alone. Sometimes the poor gather not in homes, but in ruin. An abandoned mill, the remains of an old church, a hollow beneath a fallen tree. They huddle, they share scraps, they tell stories not to entertain, but to stay awake. They laugh, they weep, they sing songs older than memory. And for a few hours, they are not beggars. They are human. Children suffer most. Their bellies swell from hunger. Their skin cracks from cold. They cry at night, then grow silent. Mothers hold them tight. Fathers break down fences for firewood. Older siblings give up their own crust of bread. But sometimes it is not enough. A small grave is dug in frozen earth with bare hands, and the winter continues. The church becomes a sanctuary and a test. Some monasteries open their gates, offer broth, a place on the stone floor. Others close their doors, claim there is no room, no food. Priests pass by in heavy robes. Some offer blessings, others avert their gaze, but still, people kneel at the threshold. Still, they pray. In towns, there are laws. Laws against vagrancy, laws against begging, laws against being cold and visible. Wanderers are whipped, driven out, mocked. But others, shopkeepers, widows, shepherds, sneak bread under shawls, place coins in open palms, pretend not to see the law, only the person. In the shadows, compassion glows faintly. Winter deepens. The snow piles higher, the wind grows sharper, the nights stretch longer, and still they move. They follow warmth like animals drawn to light, to song, to the scent of food. A wedding in a village, a feast day at a church, a lantern in a window. Even just the smoke from a chimney, it means life is there. Sometimes kindness finds them. A farmer's wife beckons one into her kitchen. A stable boy offers his straw bed for a night. A merchant's daughter slips dried apples into a beggar's pocket. These are not grand gestures. They are quiet, but in winter, quiet kindness saves lives. And when spring comes, if spring comes, they return to the roads. Their numbers are smaller, their steps slower, but they have endured, not because they were strong, but because they were stubborn, because they found each other, because someone, somewhere, said yes instead of no. So tonight, as you lie warm beneath your blankets, think of them, the ones with no door to lock, no fire to tend, no feast waiting, but who still held hands, shared crusts, sang songs to the stars, and dreamed, not of riches, not of castles, but of morning. Winter was long and cold and hungry, but it was not without light. Even in the harshest months, medieval people carved out time for celebration, not in grand banquets or glittering spectacles, but in ritual, in tradition, in moments of joy, passed hand to hand like a flame in the dark. These were the winter festivals, ancient and holy, simple and profound. Let us visit them now. Yule, a memory of the old world. Before Christmas was Christmas, there was Yule. It came with the winter solstice, the longest night of the year when the sun seemed farthest from the world and hope flickered like a candle in the wind. In the countryside, people lit fires. They brought in greenery, holly, ivy, pine reminders that even in death, some things lived. The Yule log, great and heavy, was dragged into the hall. It was burned slowly over 12 days, its embers kept as protection against evil. Stories were told, songs were sung. The dark was kept at bay not just by flame, but by community. It was a time of superstition, yes, but also of connection. A pause in the stillness, a gathering in the cold. Christmas, a sacred celebration. With Christianity came a new focus, the birth of Christ. Christmas was both spiritual and social. The Mass at midnight, held by candlelight, filled churches with quiet reverence. The Nativity was read aloud. Carols echoed through stone chapels, sung slowly, reverently, in Latin or plainchant. In homes, people fasted before the feast. Then, on Christmas Day, they ate well, if they could. Roasted meats, spiced wine, pies of minced fruits and dried figs. Even the poor received alms. The Lord might offer food at the gate or invite tenants to dine in the great hall. It was a day of warmth, not just of fire, but of spirit. St. Stephen's Day, the feast of the first martyr, the 26th of December, the day after Christmas, another feast. St. Stephen, the first Christian martyr, was remembered, but in the countryside, the day took on other meanings. It was a time for charity, for giving leftovers to the poor, for honoring servants and grooms. In some villages, young boys would carry boxes collecting coins or food for those in need. In others, the wren hunt took place. Men and boys chased a small bird, the wren, through the village, symbolizing the end of the old year and the spirit of renewal. The bird, once caught, was honored, sometimes caged, sometimes freed. The symbolism was layered, the ritual strange, but all of it was shared, feasting, fools, and firelight. Between Christmas and Epiphany lay the 12 days of Christmas. Each night, fires were lit. Each day, songs were sung, and laughter returned to hallways that had been quiet too long. In noble courts, jesters led feasts of fools where roles were reversed, and servants became kings for a day. Masks were worn, rules were broken. In monasteries, even the strictest abbots allowed mirth. One monk might be crowned Lord of Misrule, commanding his brothers to dance, to joke, to feast. For just a moment, the world turned upside down, and in the turning came release. Epiphany, the arrival of the three kings, the 6th of January. And then came Epiphany, the day the Magi were said to have visited the Christ child bringing gold, frankincense, and myrrh. It marked the end of the festival season, the last echo of joy before the long, quiet months ahead. In churches, children dressed as kings. Star-shaped lanterns were carried through the streets. Chalk was used to bless doorways, writing the initials of the kings, C plus M plus B. In homes, a special cake was baked, the 12th night cake. Inside, a bean was hidden. Whoever found it was crowned king or queen of the feast. They wore a paper crown. They gave silly orders. They drank sweet cider, and everyone laughed, because the world was cold. But here, at the table, in the glow of firelight, they were warm. The return to winter. After Epiphany, the decorations came down. The greenery burned. The songs faded. Life resumed, but something has shifted. For 12 days there had been celebration. For 12 nights they had laughed, sung, prayed, eaten, remembered. And in those moments, small though they were, winter had been held at bay. Not banished, not broken, but softened, like snow melting on a windowsill, like a candle that keeps burning just long enough. A final thought. These festivals were not grand. They were not full of spectacle or splendor, but they mattered, because in the deepest part of winter, when food was low and the wind howled, and hope grew thin, they reminded people that joy was still possible. That light could still shine. That song could still rise. That warmth was not just fire, but one another. There is something about winter that invites stories. Maybe it's the long nights, or the wind at the window, or the firelight casting shadows on stone walls. Whatever it is, winter in the medieval world was not only a season of hardship, it was a season of myth. When the real world faded into snow and silence, and the unseen world stepped forward to whisper. Let us draw close to the fire now and listen. The wild hunt across the forests of Europe, many told of a ghostly procession that rode through the night sky in winter. The wild hunt, a host of spectral hunters on black horses, with glowing hounds and winds howling at their backs. They passed through stormy skies or misty woods, unseen by most. But if you heard the wind shift suddenly, if dogs barked wildly for no reason, you were to kneel, or hide, or pray. For to look upon the hunt was to risk being taken, carried off, vanished until spring or forever. Some said it was led by Odin, others by Herne, the hunter, or lost kings long dead, but all agreed it rode only in winter. Yule beings, spirits of the solstice. Even before Christianity, Yule brought with it strange visitors. Some homes left out offerings, bread, ale, or bits of meat, not for God, but for the hidden ones. Spirits, elves, ancient gods now forgotten, but not entirely gone. In the far north, people told of Tomten or Nice, small bearded guardians of the home. They helped with chores, protected animals, but offended easily. Leave them porridge on Yule night, and they will bless your year. Forget, and mischief would follow. Cows would go dry, milk would sour, doors would slam in the wind. Better to remember, better to give, the 12 nights when the veil was thin. From Christmas to Epiphany, the 12 days were sacred and dangerous. It was said that during these nights, the veil between worlds grew thin. Ghosts walked, fairies whispered, demons tested the weak. Children were warned not to go out after dark. Candles were kept burning. Doors were marked with chalk or ash. And every creak in the wood, every flicker in the flame was watched with fear, with awe, and sometimes with a knowing smile, because some families told stories not to frighten, but to pass the time. Fireside tales, warnings wrapped in wonder. In cottages and great halls alike, stories were told by firelight. Some were true or believed to be. Others were less true, but loved all the same. There was the tale of the black dog, a beast as big as a cow, with eyes like coals, who followed lost travelers and vanished at dawn. There were whispers of knocking spirits, who tapped 3 times on a window when death was near. And always, there were stories of strangers who came in the snow, offering warmth and vanished without leaving footprints. Strangers with glowing eyes, or none at all. Why the stories mattered. These tales were more than entertainment. They were explanations for what could not be seen or understood. Why a cow died. Why a child fell ill. Why the snow came early or the river froze too long. They gave shape to fear and softened it, because a world filled with spirits was less lonely, even if it was more frightening. In the monasteries, silence and shadow, even monks sworn to reason and scripture knew the chill of ancient fears. In the cloister, candles were never left unlit in winter. Infirmaries hung herbs not just for healing, but for warding. Some monks wrote of visions white-cloaked angels appearing in the snow. Others spoke of hearing singing in the woods when no one stood there. Faith and folklore lived side by side. Neither banished the other. The power of words. These stories were not written. They were spoken, whispered, shared, embroidered over generations. Each winter, they changed a little. A name here, a fate there, but the core remained. Darkness exists, but we are not alone. And there is always light if we tell the right story. The final story of the night. One last tale before we sleep. There was once a woman who lived alone in the woods, old and bent, with eyes the color of frost. Each winter, children feared her, said she stole the warmth from your breath, said she cursed the snow to fall longer. But one boy, hungry and lost, knocked on her door. She gave him soup and a bed and a story. When he left in spring, he told his village, she's not a witch, she's winter, and she's just lonely. And from that day on, they left her bread and songs and silence, because even the coldest season needs to be remembered. So now, dear listener, as your eyes grow heavy and the wind taps softly at your window, know that you are part of a long, long line. A line of people who huddled by firelight, who whispered stories into the dark, who believed not because they were foolish, but because they were human, and who, in the heart of winter, kept each other warm with words. Not all who endured winter did so with family. Some faced it in silence. Behind high stone walls, beyond the frozen cloisters, monasteries stood like quiet beacons, places of discipline, of learning, of prayer. And in the coldest months, they became colder still. Let us step softly now into their rhythm, into the hush of the sacred, into the winter of the faithful. The bells, in every monastery, life was marked by bells. And in winter, they rang through fog and snow just the same. Matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, compline. 7 times a day and sometimes once in the deep of night the monks were called, even when the air was brittle, even when frost clung to their sandals, even when their breath fogged before the crucifix. The bells did not care for comfort, only for time, and time belonged to God. Waking before the sun, the monks rose while the world still slept. They did not speak. Candles were lit, casting halos of light through the dark. Woolen habits were pulled on over thin linen, leather sandals tied with stiff fingers. They walked 2 by 2 through the cloister, the open square now full of frost and shadow. The stone beneath their feet was slick. Their footsteps echoed, but no one complained. The night office vigils. Before dawn, in the coldest part of night, they gathered in the chapel. Their voices rough with sleep formed a single sound. They chanted psalms, read scripture, paused for long silences. There was no fire in the chapel, no comfort but the rhythm. Domine labia mea aperis. O Lord, open my lips. And they prayed for the world, for the living, for the dead, for strength to meet the cold day ahead. The cloister in winter. The cloister was a square open to the sky, ringed by covered walkways. In summer, its garden bloomed. In winter, it slept beneath snow. But still, the monks passed through it, on their way to prayer, to work, to contemplation. Sometimes, one would pause just for a breath of icy air, to look at the trees bare and still, to watch the sun struggle through the clouds, and then he would move on, because the schedule allowed no lingering. The work of cold hands. Even in winter, there was work. Copying text in the scriptorium, a long stone room lit by narrow windows. Fingers trembled. Ink thickened in the well. Parchment cracked in the cold. Still, they wrote, in principio erat verbum. In the beginning was the word, one letter at a time, one breath at a time. In the herb garden, others gathered dried plants, lavender, sage, rosemary carefully wrapped for the infirmary. In the kitchens, root vegetables were sorted. In the stables, animals were fed. Work was prayer, prayer was life. Even in winter, especially in winter, the refectory a silent meal. At midday, the bell rang again, and the monks filed into the refectory, the dining hall. They did not speak. One monk read aloud from a book of saints. The rest listened, chewing quietly. Bread, cheese, porridge. Sometimes a boiled root, no seasoning, no fire, only food. And words, when the meal ended, they bowed their heads and left. The infirmary. In a small, warmer room, the sick were tended. Blankets layered thick, soups stirred gently. Herbs hung from the rafters. Sometimes a monk lay fevered. Sometimes he did not rise. But the others prayed over him, bathed him, read psalms beside his bed. And when he died, they sang softly, faithfully, into the cold. Compline the final prayer. As the sun set, the monks returned to the chapel one last time. Compline, the end of the day. The invitation to rest, candles flickered. The air was still. Their chant was soft, a lullaby to themselves and to the world. In manus tuas, Domine commendo spiritum meum. Into your hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit. Then they bowed, extinguished the light, and walked back to their cells. The cell, a room of one's own. Each monk had a cell, small, stone, cold, a wooden bed, a blanket, a crucifix. They slept fully clothed, with hands clasped over their chest, with breath steaming in the dark. Some whispered one last prayer. Others simply let go. And outside, the frost deepened. And yet, peace. There was no fear in this cold, only devotion. The monks did not fight winter. They embraced it. As penance, as purification, as a quiet season to draw nearer to God, their breath became prayer, their silence offering. And in the stillness of snow-covered cloisters, the divine felt close. So tonight, dear listener, imagine yourself there, wrapped in wool, candle in hand, walking through a corridor of stone, no sound but your steps, no warmth but your faith, no fear, because you are not alone. And in that silence, in that frost, you may find peace. Even in winter, not all paths are still. There are footsteps in the snow, wagon tracks pressed into ice, bells jingling on pack animals, their breath fogging in the cold. The medieval world, even under frost, moves. And those who move through it, merchants, pilgrims, messengers, travelers, carry more than goods. They carry connection. Let us walk beside them now. The winter road? The road in winter is no gentle trail. It is narrow, rutted, and white. Sometimes frozen hard as stone. Sometimes melted to slush and mud. Sometimes lost entirely beneath a blanket of drifting snow. But still, they walk it, or ride, or push carts loaded with barrels, bolts of cloth, dried fruit, salt. Not because they wish to, but because they must. Trade cannot wait for spring, nor can news, nor can faith. The merchant, he wears a thick cloak patched with waxed leather, gloves of rough wool, boots lined with straw. He has come from the coast, or the mountains, or the next town over with goods too precious to hold. Honey, glass, spices in tightly sealed pouches. He travels from village to village, sleeping in stables, under wagons, or if luck smiles in a warm barn with a generous host. He barters. He bargains. He remembers faces, names, debts. His coin purse jingles softly, but never loudly enough to draw attention in the dark. He knows winter roads are not just cold, they are dangerous. The pilgrim, she walks with a staff, a badge of her shrine sewn to her cloak. Perhaps she travels to Canterbury, or Santiago, or to a local relic said to heal the sick if reached with true devotion. She eats what is given. She sleeps on straw. She sings hymns when she is alone to keep fear away. People open their doors to her, or don't, but she continues. For her journey is not about comfort. It is about faith. The messenger, he rides fast, alone. A satchel at his side sealed letters, royal decrees, news of war, of birth, of death. He does not stop for snow, nor storm, nor night. His horse is tired. So is he. But the message must reach its end. Even if he does not, the inns and hearths scattered along these frozen roads are havens, inns, alehouses, way stations. They flicker with torchlight. They smell of hay, smoke, and boiled stew. The hearth is never empty. The benches never cold for long. Travelers gather cloaks, steaming, mugs in hand, boots set by the fire. They share stories, warnings, maps drawn in ash on the tabletop. A merchant speaks of wolves in the woods. A pilgrim warns of a bridge washed out. A bard strums a tune too soft to dance to, but warm enough to silence the wind. And for a few hours, the road disappears. The winter market. In some villages and towns, even in January, the square fills with life. The winter market arrives. Tents sag beneath snow. Merchants call out prices through scarves. Children run between barrels of apples and baskets of wool. The goods are fewer than in summer, but more precious. Preserved lemons, fur pelts, iron tools. The townspeople come wrapped in their best. They bring what they can: dried fish, flax, candles, eggs. They trade, they haggle, they smile, because for once, the world feels alive again. Voices in the cold, in these markets, amidst the frost, voices rise. Two for a groat, fresh from the port, careful, mind your step. The baker sells stale loaves, soft again when warmed. The cooper sells barrels lined with pitch. The seamstress offers mittens sewn with care. A boy plays a wooden flute. A girl sells pins from a blanket. And laughter, real hearty laughter, pushes back the cold. Why they traveled. For food, for coin, for hope. Because even in winter, life did not stop. Because even when the snow buried the fields, people still needed each other. Because sometimes the sight of another face, another soul on the road meant more than warmth. It meant we're still here. The return home, as night falls, the market quiets. Fires are doused. Wagons loaded again, boots stomped free of snow. Some stay the night. Others move on, lanterns swinging, horse puffing white breath. The road is dark again, but lighter somehow, because they carry with them more than goods. They carry stories, kindnesses, the echo of a shared laugh beneath falling snow. So now, as you listen, imagine the road, the crunch of hooves, the flap of tent cloth in the wind, and know that even in winter, even in the deepest frost, the world still turned. Because someone braved the storm, carried the message, brought the bread, and with them brought the warmth of one human reaching out to another. Winter tests more than the body. It tests the heart. And in the coldest nights, In the darkest valleys, in the silence between storms, kindness whispers. Let us now sit beside the fire once more and listen not to legends or psalms or warnings, but to stories of people, of gestures so simple they might go unnoticed. And yet, they kept the world warm. The blanket in the barn. It was the third week of snow. The village paths were frozen solid, and the old woman who lived alone at the edge of the woods hadn't been seen since the last market. Some said she had enough firewood. Some said she didn't. That night, a young girl crept from her cottage with a bundle beneath her cloak, a blanket she had stitched for herself that winter. She left it at the woman's door. No name, no note, just folded wool and hope. In spring, the girl found it again still at the door, but used, worn, with a sprig of lavender laid gently atop. Bread from the baker's wife. He was a stranger, no name, no home, just a traveler with cracked boots and frost on his beard. Most ignored him. Some muttered. But the baker's wife, who'd once lost her brother in a winter much like this, wrapped 2 rolls in a cloth and handed them over. She didn't ask his story. He didn't tell it. He nodded once. She nodded back. And when the rolls were gone, he wept. Not because he was fed, but because he was seen. The fire shared. In a small hamlet, the firewood had run low. One house still burned bright, the blacksmith's home, where logs were always stacked tall. Rather than bar his door, he opened it. Each night, families gathered in shifts, sitting, standing, sometimes just reaching out fingers toward the flame. No one spoke much. There wasn't time. But babies stopped crying, and elders smiled, and no one that winter froze in silence. A candle in the window. She lit it every night. A single candle, not because she expected anyone, but because someone once lit one for her. Years ago, as a child lost in snow, she'd followed that light to safety, to soup, to warmth. Now she lit it again for a traveler who might never come, for hope that might never knock. And one winter night, someone did knock. A boy, barefoot, cold. He didn't say much. She didn't ask. But they sat by the fire until morning. And then the candle was never just a candle again. The song in the silence. In the monastery infirmary, one monk was dying. He had not spoken in days, but a younger brother sat beside him, holding his hand. And one night, humming an old chant not from scripture, but from the village they both came from long ago, the elder stirred, smiled faintly, and, with a dry whisper, joined for 2 notes before fading. The younger monk cried, for the first time since his vows, not for death, but for the song that bridged the silence, why it mattered. These stories are not grand. They are not wars won, or kings crowned. They are a loaf of bread, a bed of straw, a door not locked, a name remembered, a hand held through the night. But in winter, they were everything. Because when the fields were frozen, when the sun disappeared before supper, when no one knew if spring would return, kindness was proof that someone would. The hidden warmth. You may never read these names in books. Agnes the weaver, Tom the orphan stable boy, Father Henri with the bad leg and warm eyes, Lady Margaret, who took off her rings to buy firewood for the poor. But their warmth lives on, in how someone knocks softly, in how a cloak is passed between friends, in how a stranger is called brother on the road, and maybe even now, in how you listen, in how you remember. So tonight, as you drift into sleep, as the quiet wraps around you like wool, know that even the coldest times hold warmth, not in great fires, but in small, brave sparks, lit one kindness at a time, by people who had little and gave anyway. Most imagined war as fire, as thunder, as blood and banners and steel crashing in sunlight. But sometimes, war is ice, silent, slow, unforgiving, and in the medieval world, armies did not fear swords as much as they feared snow. Let us step into that side of history now, where warriors marched bravely into winter and found themselves defeated by the cold. The campaign that never began. It was late autumn. A king had gathered his men, knights in armor, foot soldiers with spears, banners fluttering, drums rolling. They marched, but within days, the skies turned. Rain became sleet. The roads, mud, then snow. Tents sagged. Fires hissed out. Horses stumbled. The enemy lay just beyond the hills, but the king turned back, not from fear of battle, but from the quiet truth every general learns eventually. You cannot fight the weather. Armor, freezing to flesh. In winter, armor was not protection, it was a trap. Steel grew cold as death. Leather stiffened. Gloves soaked through and turned brittle. Men awoke with their hands frozen around hilts. Mail shirts stuck to skin. Helmets cracked from frost. A wound did not need to bleed to kill. A chill was enough. And so soldiers lined the hearth, not to plan attack, but just to stay alive. The camp in the snow. When armies stopped for the night in spring or summer, they built camps, tidy, temporary towns of tents, fires, and order. In winter, nothing stayed tidy. Fires wouldn't light. Tents tore in the wind. Food spoiled or froze. Water turned to ice. The latrines, often dug shallow, became frozen pits. Sickness spread, and men who had faced enemy blades with pride died from infected blisters or fevers caught under damp wool. Supply lines vanished. War is not won by bravery alone. It is won by bread, by boots, by the steady arrival of everything an army needs. In winter, supply wagons bogged down. Bridges collapsed under snow. Ox carts overturned in hidden ditches. And so the men starved. Not all at once, but steadily. They chewed leather. They boiled bark. They watched horses die and then ate them. And no orders from a commander could change that. When no one fought, sometimes two armies would camp across a field from each other, each waiting, watching, both frozen. No attacks, no charges, just smoke rising from both sides. Even messengers grew hesitant. Even spies stopped sneaking. Because there was no advantage to be gained when both sides were losing not to each other, but to the season. War by other means. In winter, battles didn't end, they transformed. Lords made uneasy truces. Commanders pulled back to fortresses. Smaller raids replaced large battles, quick strikes for food, firewood, or shelter. And diplomats stepped forward. Because sometimes a deal made before the fire was worth more than a field soaked in frozen blood. Soldiers became survivors. They no longer dreamed of glory, only warmth, of a dry blanket, of hot broth, of not waking with blackened toes. They told fewer jokes, wrote shorter letters, prayed longer. And when spring came, many had left behind more comrades to frost than to sword. The cold as ally and enemy, some used winter to their advantage. They lured armies into snow-covered forests. They destroyed bridges before the freeze. They cut off roads with avalanche and ice, but no one controlled it. The same storm that buried the enemy might turn and swallow the victors too. Winter, in war, was always unclaimed ground. Why history forgot the cold? Chroniclers wrote of battles, of kings, of blood spilled in valor. Few wrote of the men who died in snowdrifts, of the campfires that never lit, of the cough that silenced a captain more surely than an arrow. But their stories remain, between the lines, beneath the maps, in the silence of years when no battle was fought, because winter had already won. So now, as you listen, imagine them, wrapped in torn cloaks, sitting in frostbitten tents, watching the sky for snow, not arrows, not heroes, not cowards, just men, far from home, trying to stay warm one more night. It begins quietly, not with fanfare, not with trumpets, just with light, a little longer each day, lingering in the sky, brushing rooftops, warming stone. After months of darkness, the world opens its eyes slowly, and spring shy, soft, stubborn begins to return. The signs are small at first, a trickle of water where there was once only ice, a bird call at dawn, the first green shoot curling out of earth still hard. Children step outside without hats. Sheep bleat louder in the fields. The sun feels warm again, if only for a moment, and people lift their heads, not in celebration, not yet, but in recognition. It's coming. The hearth burns less often. No longer must the fire be tended day and night. The woodpile lasts longer. Families let embers fade in the morning. Windows open just an inch to invite air not heavy with frost. There is still cold, yes. Still mornings that bite, but in the afternoons, people smile more because their breath no longer fogs. And that alone feels like a miracle. In the fields, the snow melts, revealing furrows like forgotten words. The ground is damp, muddy, waiting, and so the people gather. Plow Monday arrives the first Monday after Twelfth Night. It is not a feast. It is not a holy day. It is something older. The return to the land. Plow Monday, the turning point. Early in the morning, the plow is taken from its resting place, decorated with ribbons, straw dolls, and sometimes even blessed with holy water. Men carry it through the village. Children sing. Women follow holding lanterns or small loaves of bread. It is part ritual, part celebration, part declaration. We are still here, and so is the earth. In some villages, the plow is drawn by men dressed in mock costume, half jesters, half saints. They knock on doors. They gather coin or food. They bring laughter back to the lanes. And the fields are touched again. Not sown, not worked, but greeted, as one would greet an old friend who has returned after a long, silent journey. The return of sound. Winter is quiet. Spring sings. The clatter of tools, the call of farmers, the creak of carts, the bark of dogs chasing sunbeams again, and the laughter of children, not the sharp giggle of mischief, but the full-bodied, unguarded kind that only comes when the world feels safe again. No one says it aloud, but they all know we made it. The body remembers. Hands ache from months of stillness. Knees are stiff. Eyes blink in brighter light, but muscles stretch. Spines straighten. Hearts beat stronger. The body like the soil thaws and people begin to plant again, not just seeds, but intentions. A new cloth woven, a letter written, a roof patched. Life returns, piece by piece. The monasteries rejoice. Monks walk longer in the cloister. They pause beneath trees. The herb gardens are cleared of dead stems, ready for planting. Hymns sound lighter, not louder, just wider, somehow. The Psalms of winter spoke of endurance. The Psalms of spring speak of gratitude. In the castles and villages, windows are flung wide, banners are mended, cloaks are stored away, not forever, but for now. Young people walk further from home. Old people sit in the sun. Even the animals seem to know. Hens lay more eggs. Cows give more milk. The world tilts forward again. Hope is not loud. It doesn't shout or demand. It hums. It rests on the breeze. It grows unnoticed, like moss on a warm stone. Spring does not erase winter, but it softens its edges, turns the memories from struggle to story. And you, dear listener, you've traveled far, from the first frost, through hunger and hearth, past shadows and saints, along roads lined with snow, to this moment where the air is sweet, where the ground is soft, where the sky stretches open like a newly unrolled map. You may not feel it yet, but it's here. Spring, light, beginning, so rest now, not from exhaustion, but in peace. You have walked beside monks, peasants, nobles, and wanderers. You have sat at fires. You have whispered in chapels. You have tasted stew, shivered beneath stars, carried stories through the cold. And now, the journey ends where it always was leading. To life. Again, always. Good night, dear traveler. May your dreams be full of candlelight, of snow melting, of birds singing in trees not yet budded. May your breath be easy, your heart full. And as the morning comes, whether in your world or theirs, may you feel what they felt then. That warmth returns.